Hi, everybody. Welcome to our new episode. Today, Betty and I are going to be talking about the soul is the genius. But before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about the Institute of Metaphysical Science there who sponsor these live streams. And it was established in 1959 as the Margaret Laird Foundation, researching, exploring, living, and teaching the science of being and the causal nature of consciousness. You can look at our website at scientificmetaphysics.org. Today, we are using the July-August 1968 Laird Letter for our source material written by Margaret Laird. She did years of Laird Letters. You can go out to the IMS site and you can pick up the whole year of 1968. But that's what we're going to be referencing is July and August of 1968. So welcome, Mom. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you.
Excellent. So again, this episode is called The Soul is the Genius. So let's get started. Or is there anything you want to say before we actually dive into this?
Nope, go right ahead.
Go right ahead. Okay. The one thing that I do want to say to everybody is that this Saturday, only 3 days from today, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, is a live cast event. It'll be a morning event from 9 until 1 Pacific time, and it's Betty Albee will be running a workshop live cast. So that'll be live over Zoom. You're welcome to go out to our website and you can check that out. And again, you can go to scientificmetaphysics.org and it'll be right there front and center, and you can sign yourself up if you'd like to participate in that. She only does like one of those a year, a great time to actually get some interaction and really
Basic.
really do your thing. So, all right. So let's see. All right, so you can do that. So let's just jump into this. We are going to, the first quote that we have comes from this Laird Letter, and it's on page 2 of this Laird Letter. And the quote is, "Soul is my capacity to recognize that what I'm feeling in my body as discomfort, suffering, and disease, I am feeling in my soul as health and joy. Whether the bodily feeling is pain or pleasure, health or disease, the fact remains that my soul is the conscious thought that is my body."
Yeah. We have a statement here that began this whole thing. Mrs. Laird was quoting from a letter from a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want to include that?
Sure, I certainly can include that. So it's also in the description of this episode. Mrs. Laird wrote, I quote a dear friend, "My soul I have known and loved long and intimately. My soul is my capacity to enjoy beauty, to know color, to hear harmony, to feel a lovely stone or a new peeled stick, to smell the fragrance of dawn in the pines. My soul and I is one of the most secret phrases, whether we go to enjoy a concert or view a sunset. There is a certain hill where we go to watch the mist creep over the valley. My soul has shown me so much beauty in simple things, especially upon this hill. Here I feel the rhythm of life in everything, the endless beauty and joy of pure being." Is on page 4 of this letter.
No. It is all of the senses that we talk about as human beings: seeing, hearing, feeling, tasting, touching, etc. All of those, the whole sensorium is the language view of the God idea, soul. And the thing that is significant here is that those are not things that we have to struggle to achieve. They just, soul and everything that soul includes is man. So man is not a possessor of any of the senses, but the senses, the whole sensorium, is man being. appreciating that is a whole nother subject. That's kind of what we're talking about here today, because we forget that what's actually present all the time, every moment, is the God idea in action. And that is our divinity shaping our humanity. That's why we can enjoy a beautiful sunset. That's why we love to see a mountain stream in the woods. You know, all of those expansive experiences are touching on the being that we are. Go ahead.
Yeah. So in this, soul is my capacity. I'm just going to read this again. Soul is my capacity to recognize that what I am feeling in my body as discomfort, suffering, and disease, I am feeling in my soul as health and joy.
Yeah.
I kind of want to pause right there in that first sentence, because that's extraordinary. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And whether the bodily feeling is pain or pleasure, health or disease, the fact remains that my soul is the conscious thought that is my body.
Yeah. And I have kind of a fun story on that. I was with a friend who was having a problem and working it through, and she had to take her blood pressure every morning and every evening. And normally it stayed right within a certain range, you know, pretty steady. And then one day it spiked, went way up. And then it was okay for another half a day. And again, that day it spiked again. And I sat and thought about that and looked at the schedule we had been on. And there had been one of her dear friends that had visited once. And then she called on the phone once. And both times, blood pressure spiked. And so I spoke to my friend and I said, have you ever noticed that you get tense and upset when you're around your friend? And I named her. And she says, well, she just annoys me to death. You know, she's just impossible to work with sometimes. I can't tell you how annoyed I get. And I said, well, what I have for you is a question. Can you handle the annoyance? Can you just let her be the way she is and decide that you are not going to be trapped by that? You're not going to be annoyed by that. And she says, so what are you getting at exactly? I said, well, I just noticed that when you're in a conversation, either on the phone or in person, your blood pressure spikes. And that's up to you, you know. That's not caused by her. She's just being herself. You can decide that you don't have to be a reaction machine to her. And she says, oh, she says, I don't know. I said, well, give it a try. See. And she did. And guess what?
No spike.
It went up slightly, but not much.
Yeah.
And you could see that she was making some concerted effort to just allow that to be. And it made all the difference in the world in the way she was living. And it's kind of a funny example, except that it happened last week or so. But to me, right away, I saw how much we're in charge of what we call our health, so to speak. We are allowing ourselves to react to the way we perceive what we call another person. And right there, it tells us that we're standing in our language world as if it were real and paying no attention to whatever reality is actually present.
Yeah.
So I want you to, or I invite you anyway, to take a look. When you get upset, it's never the guy over there that's upsetting you. It's you allowing yourself to be a reaction machine to something going on that's none of your business. How somebody lives their lives is up to them. It has nothing to do with you. Allow it to be.
Right.
Leave it alone. Be yourself. You'll save yourself a lot of wear and tear.
Right. So the thing that I love is that I love that the way it looks is not the way that it is. So
Yep.
what you've said so many times throughout my life is thank you for sharing. So whatever the picture looks like, it's like, okay, well, thank you for sharing. Whatever my judgment is about whatever something looks like, well, thank you for sharing. And so I have a similar story to just talk about because it's funny. Yesterday, we had things going on or whatnot, and Jen came upstairs and she said, "Don't flush the toilets." And I was like, "What?" And she goes, "There's a big puddle down in the basement, and it's not draining, and it's coming back up." And I said, "Okay." So she said, "So don't flush." And this was probably 10:30 in the morning, maybe 11. So this guy finally arrives to deal with our plumbing issue at 4 in the afternoon. And so, anyway, long story short, he's there till about 8:30 with their little thing going out from on the main all the way out to the street. But he was about 10 feet short, but it still didn't ever, usually in the first 20 feet, he says, usually gets whatever the thing is, and it, turns right through it and opens it up and everything can flow. So he left yesterday at 8:30 going, "Well, I'll come back in the morning, but we might have to dig up your front yard." And Jen is sitting here going, "Oh my God, that's like a huge expense." On top of which it's getting ready. I think it was supposed to snow today. But it was like, wow. So I just looked at the whole situation and I thought, well, God, there's only one thing going on. No matter what it looks like, it's all perfection functioning. And I just thought, okay, so Jen's doing all the stuff, looking at how she's going to organize, if this is going to be a big expense, how we have to do it. The guy showed back up at 10 this morning with a longer 10 more feet or 20 more feet. And he went back in there. And at some point, he noticed that it was draining, like that something had happened. And it wasn't anything specific like what he's used to. So that's all still kind of a mystery. So at any rate, it's all draining. It's all fine. Nothing needs to be done. We don't have to upset the front yard and dig it all up and do anything with that. It just started to flow. And so he was still scratching his head about what could it have been. And so we have a couple theories, but the bottom line is that, it certainly didn't look very good last night. And today when he came back, he wasn't very positive about, okay, we're going to, I don't know what this is, but then I think he was here for probably 40 minutes this morning and it all just started to flow. Boom. So we could go around and flush all the toilets that we filling up. But I'm just saying it may be the way it looks. It's not the way it is. It may, whatever I'm looking at as discomfort, suffering, and disease, I'm feeling in my soul as health and joy and perfection. And that's the divinity present. And when you live in the understanding of the divinity that shapes your ends, you don't get sucked into the picture.
Yeah.
So anyways, I find that kind of interesting. So at any rate, going on, so that's the quote that I just think that's I just love that quote. So now let's look at, well, how did Mary Baker Eddy say it in Science and Health? How the way she said it, because the way that Margaret Laird says it, the way that Mary Baker Eddy in her time said it, the way that Betty says it, the way that you would say it in your own creation, the way that Mary Baker Eddy said it on Science and Health on 400, line 12, eradicate the image of disease from the perturbed thought before it has taken tangible shape in conscious thought, alias the body, and you prevent the development of disease.
Yep. It's interesting that says the same thing. When you think about it.
Right. So when you compare the two, would you think that says the same thing? So the one thing that I want to say to everybody is that for those of you who are out here, if you're on YouTube and you're watching this from our YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up if you're enjoying this conversation. You can give us a heart on Facebook. And if you have any questions, if you have anything you want to say, go ahead and just enter that right into the comments and they'll come to us and we can take those up. So we welcome any engagement around any of that as well. So thank you, and we'll just continue. So those two things are basically saying the same thing. Anything more you want to say about that, Mom?
No, actually.
No? Okay, so then we go on to Mind is the Athlete on page 188, and this is the way that Betty says it.
The same thing.
Same thing as what we just said, what we said in the Laird Letter, what we pulled from Margaret Laird, and that is we rejoice in the knowledge that the one and only body is soul, conscious thought, the sensing of good in and as every organ and function. Hearing in metaphysical science is the healing, sorry, my bad. Healing in metaphysical science is the comprehension of divine facts.
Yep.
So it's not about hearing, it's about hearing with your understanding. Can I say it that way?
Yeah, it's soul.
Yeah.
Soul sensing.
Mm-hmm. Could that also be intuition?
Yes. And instinct.
Okay.
And a hunch.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah.
All right. Anything more on that?
Well, the key, Mrs. Eddy says throughout all her teachings, the key to freedom is understanding. So all of these things we do actually access the aha moment when your perception shifts. And you call that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So as we walk along doing our thing from day to day, there is a shift going on because we are no longer where we were 5 minutes ago or 2 days ago or 1 year ago. We shift all the time, and we're very unaware that the shift is taking place unless something outstanding occurs.
Right.
But it is an ongoing being itself being, calling itself Betty.
Yeah.
And the Betty doesn't do much shifting, but the being walks right on.
Right. And what's interesting, though, is when you're consciously aware, you see things that you didn't see before, when literally nothing really big earth-shattering has occurred.
Right.
And yet everything has shifted.
Yep. And you know, another interesting story, I have a friend that I've talked with frequently on the phone, and she's always interested in the science view on whatever comes up in her life. And what is so interesting to me, I've known her for years and years, and she says, she'll tell me something, how it's worked out and what it looks like now and what occurred to her to do and so on. And then, you know, another day later, she'll say to me, you know, I've really never seen any direct response from my study of science. And I just laugh because she has demonstrated a whole lot in her life of science.
Right.
But she didn't identify it that way.
Right. Yeah, it's fun.
I reflect back to the early days when Mrs. Eddy was establishing Christian Science. She could never get people to see that what was occurring was out of who they were being, was the science that they were now living with and entertaining and engaging. And I just had to laugh. I thought, well, that's true. That's the way it is, whether we know it or not. That's what's going on.
Yeah, very cool. All right. So on page 3 of the Laird Letter in July and August of 68, Margaret Laird wrote, "Soul is the rhythm and order, the genius of creating a universe of beauty, harmony, and joy, the guiding star of human behavior. The ignoring of my soul is apparent as lack of individuality, originality, wit, humor, versatility, and appreciation."
Yep.
So when you buy, is it basically saying when you buy the picture and the circumstances and the look of things going on, you're ignoring soul?
Yeah, you could say that.
Which means then you get all this stuff of
unaware.
Say that again.
You're either unconscious of it or unaware.
Yeah. So then what you end up with is lack of individuality, originality, wit, humor, versatility, and appreciation. Does that mean
And
you're just a bundle of complaints?
yeah, no sense of humor either.
All right.
Yeah.
I only sometimes can see myself in that. All right. All right. And then so that's what Margaret Laird said in there. So let's look at Science and Health, page 400, line 20. Mary Baker Eddy said, when we remove disease by addressing the disturbed mind, giving no heed to the body, we prove that thought alone creates the suffering. Without divine control, there is discord, manifest as sin, sickness, and death.
Yep.
So
Very well said.
yeah. So what you're saying is, and what you're saying, even with your original story and your first story, basically what you're saying is you're in the driver's seat. We have everything to say about how our world occurs for us.
Yeah. And when you indulge the human personality, well, I don't like her. Well, she's so annoying. You know, I can't stand it when she does that. Oh, it just makes me so angry. All of that stuff you are doing to yourself, being a reaction machine to something that you think is going on outside of your existence, outside of your consciousness. But guess what? Who's hearing it? Who's evaluating it? Who's sentencing it and judging it?
Right.
Who's responding negatively? Who's allowing themselves to be carried away by their perception of what they think is another person?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we live ourselves that way blindly a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we are always in the driver's seat. I'm going to talk about that on my live cast, actually.
Right. And that's this Saturday. For those of you who might want to attend that workshop, it's going to be Saturday morning from 9 to 1 Pacific time via Zoom. So you can attend via Zoom. It'll actually be taking place in La Jolla, California. All right. So, and then this is the way that you've said it and expressed it in your book. Again, on page 188, you say, facts live in the acknowledgement of those facts, and this is our body. The only man there is the man you are being as conscious identity.
Yeah. You know, you suppose that that other guy you see over there is outside of your consciousness. But without consciousness, there would be no awareness of what you call another. Mm-hmm. None at all. So you only live within your consciousness of what you see all around you and how accurate is your seeing.
Right. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right. And then Mrs. Laird also quoted John Dorsey in this, I believe, in this Laird letter.
Yeah, she did.
And I missed the page, so I'm going to go find it now. What page was that? Just on, was it on
page 3, the bottom of the second paragraph?
Oh yeah, right there. So at page 3, bottom of the second paragraph. And John Dorsey said, either I see my soul in all of my living, or I ignore it, for it must be. And then you had in quotes, what we ignore dominates us.
Yeah.
So that which we ignore, that we know something's up and we just don't want to deal with it, so we ignore it.
Yeah.
Will dominate. So
go ahead.
It's a form of resistance. Yeah.
That's right. So it will persist. Your annoyance will persist. The problem will persist. And it could get worse depending on you.
Right. Depending on what it takes to get your attention.
And Mrs. Laird gave us the summation of what happens when you ignore your soul. Mm-hmm. She says, the ignoring of my soul is apparent as lack of individuality, originality, wit, humor, versatility, and appreciation.
Right.
Yeah. So that when you find yourself in those modes, take a look and say, hey, wait a minute. How could I be here if soul wasn't present? And if soul is present, I don't have to have all this unpleasantness. Who
Right.
says? And guess who says? I say. And for me, it can go. If you don't say so, have fun.
Right.
I have a response. Can I read this or share it? Because I don't know whether Curtis is listening right now, but I got a question from him. When we were talking about anxiety and depression and all that stuff, he sent a question saying, how does one work collectively to overcome mass hysteria? And so I wrote him a little note and says, and I couldn't get it sent because I didn't have his email where I was. But anyway, just as Jesus healed the man of the belief of leprosy, we recognize that he did not rid us of leprosy. The man was free, but leprosy was still going around and it is still present actually on the earth. All right, so the same thing is true with mass hysteria. Mass hysteria comes and goes, and it's a reaction machine mechanism, but you do not have to be a victim of it. It only occurs with you as a victim when you give it consent. You give it agreement. Oh my, this is terrible. This is happening. Oh dear. Instead of recognizing that that's the way it looks. Now, what's actually going on?
Mm-hmm.
And Mrs. Laird was pointing out, and Mary Baker Eddy does too, that there is in the human picture, there is a chemicalization going on. And when something looks all topsy-turvy and upheaval occurs, it's because truth is emerging and something else is dropping away.
Mm-hmm.
And that never goes without an upheaval.
Right.
You let it alone. And when you let it alone, it disappears of its own.
Yeah.
You try to get rid of it, it will hang around forever.
Yeah. Yeah, there's and the whole thing about, letting things go and being kind of being open.
Yep.
Where you see things you might not have seen before. There was a story that I heard in listening to Margaret Laird's Liverpool, 1962. And what she was talking about, there was a guy that she knew, a man that she knew that had a ball bearing company. And he had this ball bearing company and it had ceased operation. And he had moved from Chicago, where he had this company, out to the West Coast in California. And he saw an RFP, I guess, request for proposals, come through from the US government about the need for this ball bearing that actually had never been produced before. It had to be on a spaceship. It had to be going, up into outer space. It had to be completely resilient to really high levels of heat. And so he thought, well, there is no problem without a solution. So he flew back to Chicago and he got his people together and he said, and I think one was his brother or something. Anyways, he said, find the metals that will make this ball bearing. And they ended up doing research and won the proposal and the bid and ended up with 4 or 5 factories producing the ball bearings for what went on the spaceships, that, the spacecrafts that went up into outer space. Reignited his whole business, which had shut down after the war and all that, and kind of, that kind of thing. But it's the listening that you are, where things show up that aren't otherwise, visible. But it's the listening for who you are and the divinity present, and that's kind of that story. But I just think it's proper because it's kind of soul listening.
Yep, and it's a willingness to listen.
Mm-hmm.
He had the story too with that man is that he had sold his business and retired, and he did not like retirement. And he was looking around in California for what he could do next. And that's when he read this. And he flew back to Chicago. And before you know it, he's back in business. And he loved it. He said, forget retirement. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's the interesting unfolding. And you just wouldn't necessarily, he didn't have any designs on it. It's just, he just followed what it was that showed up. And he thought, well, they're looking for this and it's never been made before. They don't know how to make it. But where there's a problem, there's already a solution. We just have to see it.
Yep.
And that's what he set about doing.
Yep.
So, any rate, so if there's any questions, I don't see any. What I do want to tell you is that there is a live cast this weekend on Saturday morning for 4 hours from 9 to 1 with Betty Albee, right here, Betty. And
Yes.
that will be done via Zoom. You can go out to the website, scientificmetaphysics.org, and sign up for that if you would like to participate. It's a workshop kind of a deal. And the topic is the lens of awareness. So, so that if that interests you, then go ahead. We'd welcome you there. And otherwise, we will see you next week. No, we won't. We're going to skip a week. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And in the beginning of November, we will not be on next week. So we'll see you in 2 weeks. And until then, go out and start really listening, start really seeing the beauty, the harmony, the joy, no matter what the picture looks like. Challenge yourself and see what shows up.
And have the fun of your soul presence.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Until then, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.